Hello and welcome to the Tech for Climate podcast. I'm Guillaume, your host, and each week I'm fortunate to share with you stories from climate tech founders, investors, and corporations sharing their unique insights into this fast-moving industry. Eventually, like me, you will learn, discover, and get inspired by those unique men and women who are contributing to the fight against climate change, and I hope it will help you to take a step in this formidable movement. So before we start, I just want to share a few words about us, as this podcast is just the tip of the iceberg of what we do at Startup Basecamp to support the climate tech movement. Our mission is to accelerate capital deployment towards climate tech founders, allowing them to focus on scaling their solutions. How do we do that? Every day, we help founders access to resources and connection and gain the visibility they need to expand their growth. We do this in a number of ways with a membership platform, a Slack group with a growing number of founders, investors, and experts from around the world. And recently, we went one step further with the matching services to connect founders with top climate tech investors. Keep in mind that we are able to do all of this thanks to the support of our listeners and our members. So please like and subscribe, share one episode with a friend, join a community, and if you haven't already done so, make a small donation to support our work. It really means the world to us. And now, enjoy the show! Hi everyone, in this new episode of Investor Series, join me to discover Extantia, a pioneering climate-first venture fund. They are setting new standards by backing game changers in the climate tech landscape, emphasizing real-world impact over mere green optics. Their mission? Fueling innovations that turn the tide against climate change with a special focus on deep decarbonization solutions across Europe and the US. Let's get to know together Yair Reem, partner at Extantia, who is an electrical engineer with the soul of a storyteller and a knack for transformative technology. He transitioned from tech expert to climate investors armed with insights from the early days of cleantech. This episode zooms in on green ammonia's transformative potential, dissecting its role in reducing agriculture's carbon footprint. Let's unpack the science and strategy behind it, with Extantia spotlighting the intersection of green tech and venture capital, and discover the innovation shaping our agricultural future and learn how Extantia approach is nurturing the seeds of sustainable change. Tune in for a glimpse into the green ammonia revolution. The second part of the show, Yair stresses the fact that in fundraising, storytelling is paramount. A good product and presentation are vital, but forming genuine relationships and conveying a clear vision can make a real difference. Regarding work-life balance, for him, it's about achieving harmony by engaging deeply in your passions. Balance isn't just dividing time between work and personal life, but integrating both in a way that complements one another. Yair, welcome to the show. Hi, Yair, welcome to the Tech for Climate podcast. I'm super happy to have you finally here with us today. It's been like a couple of years that we know each other, or even more. And finally, I have the chance to have you on the podcast. So it's going to be, I think, a great opportunity to hear your story, know a little bit more about what you guys are doing with Extantia, a climate-first venture capital firm accelerating the path to a decarbonized world by uniting mission-driven entrepreneurs, scientists, investors, and business leaders to advance the transition. So welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Guillaume. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the kind invite, and I totally agree. It's overdue.
Fantastic. So that's the tradition on the show. We'd love to hear a 30-second introduction from you about Extantia.
So as you aptly said, Extantia was born. The raison d'être for Extantia is to be a climate first fund. That means that we don't just invest and then in hindsight we color the investment green, but rather we want to make sure that the first test that we're doing is see if the company can really move the needle on climate, and only then, like any other venture capital, we look at the company and see whether it's a VC case. And that is what we mean when we're saying we're a climate first venture capital firm. We are in our firm. We have a platform. We also do fund of funds investments, but our main work is on the direct side. We're investing in pan-European, occasionally also in the US, anywhere between the Israel and the UK and the Nordics, in companies that can really change and move the needle on climate. That means that most of the time these are actually hardware companies. I mean, we do also software, but most of the times the companies that pass the test are hardware based. We do in terms of stage wise. Usually it's early stage, seed, Series A, with tickets like 1 to 5 million. And one thing I must say is that we always syndicate. We find it very useful for the company and for the success of the company and the journey of the company to syndicate with other investors.
Fantastic. I love this more collaborative approach in the EVC industry, which is super important, especially in the
Totally.
tackling climate changes. It's more like a global and collaborative approach, that's for sure. So let's start from the top here. I'd love to know a little bit more about your personal story and background. I mean, what are you passionate about? What do you do besides supporting climate tech founders and investing in them? I mean, what makes you feel inspired or your best self? As I always ask, who's here?
That's a good question. Maybe I should ask my wife. But look, originally I keep saying I'm by education I'm electrical engineer, but by heart I'm a storyteller. I really love telling stories and talking about narratives and strategic narratives, and how, one of the biggest realization I had was that despite being a technologist and an engineer by trade, I realized that is only the part that gives you the ticket to play the game, but to win the game, you have to have a really good story and sell that technology. So that's kind of my passion about not just building the best technologies in whatever we do, but also to have the right story. So that's something that I'm very adamant and passionate about. Apart from that, I am avid cooker. I love cooking and baking, and following my childhood passion is I'm still playing with Lego bricks. So.
Fantastic. So what was your last Lego construction that you did?
Currently with my son, we're into different types of airplanes.
That's exciting. I still have the Saturn V rocket to build in my office here.
Yeah,
So I'm looking for a
exactly.
little bit more cool time to do it. That's super interesting and exciting. So maybe, tell us a little bit more about your previous work-life experiences prior to the launch of Extantia. I mean, if you could maybe reflect on one or two, I would say, key moments and key experiences that you had during that journey that, in a way, gave you an edge to launch the firm and be at the origin of the firm in itself. I mean, let us know a bit more about that.
Sure. So I said previously, I was an engineer and then transitioned to the investment side. I worked for many years for the Hasso-Plattner Ventures firm that was founded by the co-founder and chairman of SAP, Hasso-Plattner. And I've been there for almost a decade. And I think to come to the point to my climate journey, I think what's most relevant here and maybe helped me this wave in the climate tech, right? I mean, you have to change the name. It cannot be cleantech 2.0, right? Talking about stories, you have to rebrand it. Is the fact that I've been there in cleantech 1.0. Yeah, not the entire journey, but not since 2008, but since 2010, and then 12, 13 that I've seen that diminishing. And basically learning many lessons. I mean, back then we've also looked at amazing technologies that were out there, and it's not the first time that people are working on hydrogen or fuel cells or biomass conversion and anaerobic digesters or solar panel. Yeah, we've heard all of that 10, 15 years ago as well. So and we can talk about what changed, but I think that a lot of the lessons learned from that time gave me the edge and the impetus to come back to the topic and do that better this time.
Do you have maybe one or two lessons learned from that previous era? Because it's always interesting. I mean, clearly 2020, 2021 was like the emerging of this new category, climate tech per se. But veterans like you in the cleantech 1.0 were there already, saw things that are different today. Maybe you have one or two key lessons to share that with the audience that is different from that era.
Sure. So maybe two things. I think one on the technology side, I think that we as VCs, and we could talk maybe about that later. I mean, what is the sweet spot that what we can realistically do as venture capitalists and understand the limit of these asset class for good and bad, but it is an asset class that has a 10-year lifetime horizon usually, and you need to fundraise again every 3-4 years. And I think that back then we invested too early, so to speak, in things that were still on the R&D side rather than ready for prime time commercialization, and that didn't match the life cycle of the VC fund. So that was something that we learned, okay, and that today we're trying to make sure that we're investing in something that is ready to leave the lab and to see the real sunlight of private sector. And so that may be one thing. The other, and that is maybe on the macro setting rather than necessarily on the companies themselves, is that you see it's all about customers. And back then, the industry that we were out to disrupt, take the oil and gas industry, energy industry, constructor industry, shipping industry, you name it, they were not there on their journey. It was just too early. Whereas today, the number, I don't know if number one, but definitely very high on the priority of every CEO is decarbonization, energy transition. And what do we do about that? And if people understand, and be it pressure from government or pressure from consumers, that they understand that they need to do something about that. And, it was said, Mark Andreessen, I think, said over a decade ago that software is eating the world. And I keep saying that the next decade, there is another S, but that the sustainability is going to eat the world. And if you're not going to be a sustainable company, you're going to be dead. And that means that those customers are spending more budgets, money on this transition, which in turn means customers for our and buyers for our portfolio companies.
Yeah, so I hear you definitely a timing in terms of technology readiness, and I would say in terms of
exactly
customer regulation, pushing them in terms of probably the regulation is definitely also something that is pushing now everybody, and visible consequences. Everybody is how too hot, how too flooded, how too cold. So definitely there's a good timing, and glad to have people like you pushing the ball towards that better world. So a little bit last question before we dive into green ammonia. I'd like to understand more on the personal side. Do you have maybe like any aha moment that you could recall or define as such that in a way made you as an engineer, as electrical engineers, as you mentioned, say, okay, I want to move and quite early in your career into this more like clean climate industry in itself?
Well, I don't think that in my case there is one aha moment, but everything that I've done throughout my career, I always wanted it to have an edge that is doing some goodness beyond just the financial return or whatever return that was there. And when I was thinking on my next move and wanted to start my own firm and become an entrepreneur, and I was thinking or was reflecting on everything that I've done over the past decade and where were the moments that I went home with a good feeling that, hey, I did something good today. And I had to be honest to myself, and it was not the moments where I did another software app, whatever, that is delivering pizza from A to B. Uh, so, and that's where you start to say, okay, what do I want to do next? And you have the kids, and then you want to contribute. And time is the only resource kind of that we have. And I was saying, well, everything that I've done around cleantech, climate over the past decade, that were actually the moments I was very happy and proud of. And I was thinking, actually, I should do that full time. So, and very honestly, so started that from maybe a pure altruism, egoistic, I would say. Yeah. So very much thinking, okay, I want to do something good for climate. It's also then naturally all the after Paris climate conference, and yeah, so I want to do something good, but only thereafter. So that's how I started. But I think only when afterwards, when I started digging into the numbers and also fundraising and starting doing investment, that I actually realized that it's the biggest business opportunity of, I don't know if just our generation, of a few generations. I mean, we're not talking about $1 billion markets, we're talking about $1 trillion markets. And basically because everything that we know in humanity in our society needs to transition, needs to change. The way we grow food, the way we deliver goods, the way we generate energy, everything has to change. And this is actually a good change, and is actually a change that is going to create a lot of wealth and a lot of jobs. So if you think about the digital revolution, and the companies that came out of the digital revolution, like Google, Facebook, Amazon, then I would say that the decarbonization revolution is going to be 100 times, at least two orders of magnitude, even bigger than the digital revolution. And hey, what we're going to see is the next BP, the next shale. I mean, this is, see the market cap of these oil and gas companies, and they are created these problems, right, so to speak. And those new companies that are going to be the green ones, they're going to be those having those market caps. So I totally see also the good thing, and we keep saying on the financial side, and we can keep saying at Extantia that fixing the planet, it's just damn good business. Yeah, so it's both good and good business.
Exactly. And I think industrial revolution, digital revolution, and now decarbonization revolution, as you mentioned, I like this new term. I never heard it before. It's definitely the massive opportunity where we can also do good. So that's a fantastic path to go. So let's take now a zoom out a little bit and take a step back at the green ammonia in industry in itself and the production of like fertilizers. I mean, challenge and opportunity. I mean, why does it matter in the climate context? So maybe you can start by giving to the audience your overview of the current situation in terms of the impact that traditional ammonia in the making of synthetic fertilizer at large is, and can contribute to GHG
Sure.
emission. I mean, this will help the audience probably to understand a bit better the magnitude of the problem, and if you could share maybe some data points to frame the context with a more macro approach prior to dive into the green ammonia per se in itself.
Sure. So the thing is, I mean, when we talk, one of the first things that that I had to do when I started talking about or learning and being active in climate, and I would say more starting 2015-ish, yeah, is that I actually didn't understand anything about climate. And there was no Bill Gates book back then. There was no John Doerr book back then. There was Václav Smil books. And Václav Smil, if you know his books, then they're each one 300 pages in 6 size fonts. And it's very, very difficult to read. So you start to struggle in reading those things. And then you start to understand, where are the emissions coming from? Where are the sectors that are emitting? What is the magnitude of the problem? Where are the big levers, and how can you do that? And you understand that on the one hand, it's a very clear problem, but on the other, it's a very fragmented problem. And because it's fragmented, it's complex. It's not like the ozone layer that, okay, it's the F gases, so we ban the F gases and boom, we fix the ozone layer. Yeah. And because it's a puzzle and it's complex, therefore it's very hard to fix. But the problem in itself, it's kind of understood by now. Yeah. And then when we started looking into the solving it, basically what we said is that what we want to focus on as a firm, and we are not the ones to invent it, we've learned from standing on the shoulders of other giants, that we want to tackle the biggest pieces of the puzzle. So not all pieces of the puzzle are equal, and there are pieces that are way bigger. And we started looking into the pieces of the puzzle, and you see that, for example, concrete is 8%, roughly the same as steel production, another 8%. Flying is anywhere between 2 to 3% of global emissions of the 50 gigatons of CO2 equivalent that is being emitted every year. And there you see that there is something interesting around ammonia. Fertilizers, and you see that is about, give or take today, about 1% of global emissions. So 500 megatons of CO2 that is being emitted every year in ammonia production. And then you're like, what is it, ammonia? Well, why are we talking about ammonia, and why is it emitting so much? Why are you producing so much ammonia? And for those who don't know, ammonia, just maybe I'll come to that in a second, but ammonia is basically nitrogen and hydrogen. Yeah, so it's NH3, 3 molecules of hydrogen, 1 molecule of nitrogen. And the reason that, and we'll talk about the production of ammonia in a second, and I'll pause in a few minutes, but the point is, why is it that we have that? And it turns out that it's a precursor. Basically, it's being used as a fertilizer. And the reason that it's being used as a fertilizer is that without ammonia, without synthetic fertilizers, something that started, and we can talk about that as well, started 100 years ago, the amount of food that we can naturally grow would be enough to support only half of the global population. So basically, if we would not have synthetic fertilizer, if we would not have this production of synthetic ammonia, there will not be enough food in the world for half of the population. And therefore, when people ask me personally about what is the most important invention of the 20th century, many people go back to, I don't know, to the internet, for example, or nuclear, or many other things. I keep going back to synthetic ammonia, basically, because that is the one thing that allowed the massive growth and prosperity along it in the 50s, 60s, 60s, 70s. Maybe I'll pause for a second.
No, and I think, I mean, I heard that many times indeed, without this synthetic ammonia, and that goes into the synthetic fertilizers, I mean, we'll not be able to feed the world. So, and we understand like the magnitude of the problem in itself. Maybe before we go into the understanding of the green ammonia per se and your own definition there, can you tell us a bit more and take a zoom out a little bit of about the market organization of the current synthetic ammonia? I mean, who are the players in itself? What are the incentivization in a way that they have to move towards a more sustainable industry in itself?
Sure. So you can imagine it's a very centralized system today. And you can imagine that the biggest manufacturers of those are the petrochemical players. And that's why, by the way, it's very important when we're talking about CO2 emissions and fossil fuels and things like that. People tend to think in terms of fuels. You say fossil fuels, yeah. So you think about fuels and you think about the oil and gas industry, but actually there is 30% of fuel of oil is being used in the petrochem industry, yeah, pharma industry, and so we have to talk about those as well. So in this regard, think about companies like BASF, for example, or Yara from the Nordics. Yeah, so these are massive producers of synthetic ammonia today, and we're talking this is a market of billions. Yeah, so in I think in 2022 there is a statistic that it was around 80 billion market, just the production of ammonia.
So now that we get a better understanding, a bit of like the original context and problem that you framed here, let's go deeper into the green ammonia solution in itself. Maybe if you can start for the audience to maybe reframing the definition of what we hear. I mean, what do we understand by green ammonia in itself, and what is the actual percentage today in the market? Are we really at the origination, or do you see like an evolution there?
Sure. So let's talk about 101 chemistry. Basically, and go 100 years back. At the beginning of the previous or century, end of the 2 centuries ago, the process that we all know today is the Haber-Bosch process. Was invented by two German scientists. And basically, that process is telling you how to synthesize, taking nitrogen that is coming from the air. Yeah? So first you need to separate the nitrogen molecules from the air. Then you need to generate hydrogen. And then in a chemical process, chemical reaction, you combine the two and you create ammonia, NH3. Okay? Now, the thing about this process is that the hydrogen to get, we already said you need electricity, you need power to get the nitrogen, and you need steam, so very high temperature water, to get the hydrogen from fossil fuel based resources, from methane. specifically. Yeah, so methane is CH4. So you take the H from the C, and in that process, what happens is that the C is being combined with the oxidization with an O, and boom, you have a CO2 emission. Yeah, so the hydrogen production is in a process that is called steam methane reform, SMR. And if you look at that, in the entire that type of a process of a Haber-Bosch process, what happens is that for every ton of ammonia, 2 tons of CO2 are being emitted. And the majority of that is coming from this SMR, the production of the hydrogen. Yeah, what we call the gray hydrogen. Yeah, hydrogen has a rainbow of colors, but it's called the gray hydrogen, the original fossil-based. So, and 73% of those emissions are basically attributed to the hydrogen production. So if I say 2 tons coming out of for every ton, then 73% of that is attributed to the production of these gray hydrogen. So this is just to understand, and sorry for the going into the chemistry lesson, but this is just to have an understanding of how the current process is, and let's call it then from now on, this is the gray. This is the ammonia that is polluting. And now we're trying to transition away from that and come up with a process that is not emitting or emitting way less. And we will call that, for this sake, green ammonia. And now we can pause, but there will be talking about all the types of pathways, but this is the differentiation between the current state of gray ammonia and what we want to talk about is a low carbon process to creating ammonia, and that is the green ammonia process.
Okay, so before going into the details of like the different paths and technology, because if I understand well, it's definitely like taking this old Bosch process and slicing up. There's a huge focus on the hydrogen production that is for 73% of the CO2 emission related to the production in itself of this gray ammonia. So before going in, I believe probably there's like different technologies getting into the process, or maybe one is taking over, and you will tell us that. As of today, just for the audience to understand, how far are we in terms of green ammonia? Do we have green ammonia already on the market? Is that something that is still very marginal compared to the gray ammonia in itself?
Yes, that is exactly the case. So as of today, we're talking about minor percentages, low number of percentages that are green ammonia percent. Yeah, we already have like, or in construction, I think around 80 projects, 80. But this is our all in the making, and we're still in very, very marginal percentages.
Yeah, so very exciting space, still a lot to be done. So maybe tell us a bit more and help us, the audience, to uncover a little bit like the new emerging technologies and process in place today to produce green ammonia. I mean, if you could maybe pinpoint a few upcoming innovation with their potential and weaknesses, where you see challenges and opportunities there. Which one are we talking about there, and where does it fit into the ammonia process production?
Sure. So again, going back, and sorry about for if I'm being too technical, but I keep saying CO2 is a molecule and you cannot blockchain it away. And we're doing with molecules, and me as an engineer, I keep regretting skipping my chemistry lessons and taking more physics. But it's all about chemistry. So it's all about, you have this nitrogen hydrogen molecule, and how do you get there, and the pathways to get this NH3. And what can you do along the way? Well, let's start the first one, and that is the one that is most pervasive and maybe more, let's call it, nothing is easy, but let's straightforward one is, at least to, as we said, the biggest polluting part in the process is the hydrogen, is the creation of the hydrogen that is coming from the methane, right? So what if we were not to take this hydrogen from methane, but do what is called green hydrogen, and basically source the hydrogen from water, from H2O? There is, so if you're not taking your H from methane, you need to take it from something else. I mean, at Extantia, we also say that, we keep saying that everything we're talking about is about the transition, right? And it's currently our hydrocarbons, the H and C's that we're burning, we source them from fossil fuels, from dinosaur bones, pretty much. And if we're not sourcing our H and C from dinosaurs anymore, where do we get them from? Yeah, and we can do another show about how do we source the C, but for this conversations, we're focusing on where do we take our H from. So if it's not from CH4, let's take it from H2O. So basically, you take one element in the process that is the sourcing of the hydrogen, and you replace it with electrolysis of water. So, and that should be an easy, straightforward process, because the Haber-Bosch process of taking the nitrogen and taking the hydrogen and combining the two molecules under heat and pressure and creating NH3 is staying the same. So if you were to be, if you are BASF, theoretically, you can retrofit your process. Now, using existing infrastructure CapEx, this is something that we as Extantia support a lot, because the time to impact is faster. You don't need to build new stuff. By the way, you create less carbon debt, because while you're building stuff, the tractors, they are tanked with diesel. So you're actually you're manufacturing steel. So you're basically doing a lot of bad before you're doing good. And we can talk about carbon debt also for a long time. But that's why whenever you have the chance to retrofit, that is a good thing. Okay, so the green ammonia via green electrolysis of water is what is being called today the green Haber-Bosch. Basically, you're doing the H from electrolysis. The challenge, though, I mean, it would have been great, yeah, but there is a but, right? And the but is, and by the way, emissions can be reduced from in this type of a process, I mean, over 70, 80%. Yeah, it's nothing is emission free, but it's a definitely low emitting process. The challenge is that the Haber-Bosch process has been out there for 100 years. And that means that people had a lot of time to make that process optimize the process and make it very efficient. And the Haber-Bosch process in itself, so the chemical reaction that is combining the nitrogen with the hydrogen, is an exothermic reaction, which means that it emits heat into the surroundings of the process. Now, if there is a heat over there, what can you do with it? Well, you can always boil water and turn that into steam. And if you have steam, what can you do with it? You can use that for the creation of the hydrogen, splitting of the CH4. So the entire process in the Haber-Bosch process, in the gray Haber-Bosch, is very much optimized and fulfilling each other, so that it's very, very efficient process. Now, if you start doing electrolysis, you're using electricity, you're not using steam. So the entire benefits that are coming from the exothermic reaction of the hydrogen, of the Haber-Bosch process, those are lost. So by definition, the green Haber-Bosch is more expensive. There is a green premium. And that is the challenge, basically.
And what green premium are we talking about compared to regular ammonia? I mean, I believe like CH4 and methane is quite cheap compared to the hydrogen production. So when you look at the whole, I would say, technico-economic approach of the process, or at least the ones that you saw in front of you on your desk,
right?
What are we talking about, and how far are we to move towards a parity
right.
where this
so today we're talking about 30 to 50% more expensive. It really depends on the project and where the project is there, and it's very much depending on the electricity prices. There is a prediction of getting to price parity by 2035. I would argue that it's going to take a little bit longer, and maybe it's for always going to be a little bit more expensive than gray hydrogen. Yeah, so that may well the case be. So that is the case of the green Haber-Bosch. There are more ways how to source nitrogen and hydrogen and how to turn those into NH3. For example, there is a natural way to do that. What is biocatalysis that is being used? Yeah, so basically, nature has been fixing nitrogen for millions of years, right? So, so what you do is nitrogen fixation in a synthetic way. It's a process of converting atmospheric nitrogen, which is basically abundant in air. You turn that into form that plants or other organisms can use to grow. Yeah, and nitrogen in itself is an essential nutrient for the plants to grow. So this is another kind of pathway to do that. But I think the pathway that's a very, I would say, early way that is happening. I think that we're mostly looking into direct electrolysis or electrochemical pathways that they're aiming to get the nitrogen from the air and the hydrogen from water, but then combine them in a single step process. Yeah, so it's a much more efficient process in doing it in a one-step approach. And this is something that we're looking to, and that's where we see most of the startups actually being active. But at the same time, unlike the green Haber-Bosch, those are more in lab scale. Yeah, so let's say less than a ton a year. Whereas the green Haber-Bosch, we already see in tons, hundreds of tons towards thousands of tons, kind of going where they're going to. Yeah. So this is just to give a feeling that there are other methodologies how to get to the NH3, but each one of them is in a different stage, and each one has its own challenges.
Yeah, and on the technico-economic side of it, I mean, you cover the green Haber-Bosch process. For those new ways of producing and combining NH3 together, do you see like a future and potential future that why not like killing because fertilizer is more expensive, meaning that the food is more expensive. And if the food is more expensive,
Yes.
the problem is like along the chain way further, a larger problem. So do you see opportunities in terms of technical economic approach there, or where the green premium could be potentially reduced with those new approach, or is it still too early to say?
I think this is where we spend most of our time. Yeah, to understand whether there is a chance to get into numbers that are market competitive. Let's put it that way. Yeah, the challenge is that you usually don't know that, and this is relevant for other topics as well, unless you scale. And we're trying to work with lab results and try to extrapolate them towards a scale up situation. But the challenge is that chemical processes don't always linearly multiple. Because you have different feedstock, you have different types of bioreactors and chemical reactors, and so it's very hard to take lab result and extrapolate. But that's definitely where most of the work that we see among startups, that's where it's been invested, to reduce the price, basically.
Okay. Looking a little bit more, and before we dive into Extantia, like to get a little bit of your opinion in terms of like this green ammonia innovation. I mean, do you see difference in between areas in the world with that innovations is coming up, and what are maybe the I would say the more macro approach and the incentive that region of the world have in a way to push this green ammonia revolution?
Sure.
Any difference
I
between
think
US, Europe?
No, I wouldn't say so. But there is something, a topic that we didn't mention, because so far we've been actually talking about green ammonia or ammonia is a mean for creating fertilizers. But actually, when we're talking about the opportunity, ammonia plays a huge role in the decarbonization, in the energy transition, in two other ways. And the one is a sustainable fuel. So basically, today, our engines are carbon-based engines. Yeah, we're burning carbon, but principally you can have ammonia. Yeah, so nitrogen-based engines. Yeah, you burn nitrogen, and especially when we're talking about the shipping industry, it might be that the shipping industry is going to use ammonia-based engines. Everybody's talking about whether it's going to be methanol or ammonia, but this is the context that we're talking about, that potentially ammonia is going to be used also as a sustainable fuel. Yeah, again, if it's been sourced and produced in a sustainable way. Yeah. But that's kind of the other element. And the third pillar, and that is why ammonia market is expected to grow 4 times than what it is today. The last element is a hydrogen carrier. So if we're talking about the hydrogen in economy and hydrogen-based industry, and hydrogen will be not just produced at the point of consumption. So yes, there are wind farms in north of Netherlands, but there will be also sun and talking about green hydrogen, electrolysis-based hydrogen in Chile, in the Gulf area. That hydrogen will have to reach the consumers, let's say Europe. And in that case, how do you ship it? And shipping of hydrogen, which is the lightest molecule, is not so easy. So one way to deal with it is combine it in a carrier. Yeah, so you turn it into ammonia and you ship ammonia, and ammonia is much easier to carry. So in that context, we also foresee a huge possibility that the ammonia market on that pillar is going to grow. Yeah. So therefore, when we're talking about ammonia and why the topic is so interesting, is that ammonia market as it is today is actually going to be fourfold bigger because of the fertilizers, the hydrogen carrier, and the sustainable fuel possibilities.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Do you see any regulation in place or upcoming or maybe missing that could accelerate this transition and the whole stimulation of the market of green ammonia?
I don't have one in particular in mind, but definitely, even if you look at shipping regulations and that shipping industry, so maritime shipping, needs to reduce its footprint over the next 2 decades. They need to blend more sustainable fuels into the mix. That is that type of regulation that is not colored ammonia, so to speak. That is one that is pushing these types of innovations.
Okay. Any question I should have asked you related to the topic that I didn't have before we dive into Extantia?
No, but I'm sure that our audience will be very happy if we stop talking about molecules and chemistry.
I think it was very interesting, and I learned a ton. For people who are not into the molecule at the molecule level, definitely they learn as well. So thank you so much. Yeah. So maybe let's go and dive into a little bit more into the specifics of Extantia. Can you tell us a bit more about like the story and the genesis of it? I mean, what was the initial gap that you guys saw into the industry in the market today that led to the thesis behind Extantia?
So I can say what is the genesis of Extantia, and there are a lot of points that came together, but I like to start my point of doing that maybe 10 even years ago, when Sebastian, my partner, and I were changing diapers to the kids together in the kindergarten. And as dads that dress the kinder up and undress, and yeah, you wait for them a lot of time in the kindergarten. So we had a lot of time to talk. And then also later on, also with Jorn, my partner, we were talking about, hey, what can we do? What is that we know how to do? At that point in time, 2019, there was not a lot of that in Europe yet. And basically we're saying that, and we've had our share, each one of us, in doing climate, now called climate investments, and basically saw the need for European-based and a DNA European investor that is local and understands climate and supports those companies. And it was very clear to us that, we're going to have a head of science person, Iris today, PhD chemistry, that is supporting these types of processes and speaking the language of the founders, and then understanding that if we're really serious about decarbonization, so yes, we do have, I don't know, people like to say that we have all the technologies today that we need to cover decarbonization, and then we can deploy them. That is, let's say, 50-60% correct. Yeah. But as we just talked about ammonia, this is a technology that we don't have yet. Yeah. And we need to get, or let's put that way, we have it, but it's not at the price point that it needs to be. And which asset class is the one that is taking innovative technologies and brings them to mass market? That is venture capital industry. But the venture capital industry doesn't like to do hardware, yeah? And therefore we said we have to build a fund that focuses on the topic from day one and build itself with the know-how, with the structure, the way we talk, the way we communicate, everything needs to be set for this target. And basically, that was the genesis of Extantia and why we came together and decided to do a fund rather than, hey, let's take a mainstream fund and do also climate. Yeah?
So what do you offer to founders that you invest in? I mean, what's the extent of the support that you have, and maybe what are the initial challenges that you see at Seed Series A in the climate slash hardware, I would say, VC class in itself? How do you support those founders? I mean, we often hear like capital is not enough anymore for founders. They also want to have someone that when they get married with, as the relationship that you develop with your founders can last in the long run. So tell us a bit more about what Extantia can offer.
Sure. Maybe before we talk about what we do is the why we do it and the reason and you know when we look about the software companies, usually software companies are being founded by guys that can code really well. Let's call them software engineers. Yeah. So they're really good at writing code and things like that. Yeah. And then the VCs always say, yeah, well, they have also to be very good in business. Okay. So on top of that, on top of the, you need to be a very good code writer. Yeah. You have to be very good. Yeah. Today, maybe you were an AI researcher. Yeah. You have to be very good in business. So you're asking two things from the same person. In climate, we're asking three things from the founders. So they have to be the best scientists. So they have to come with a market domain expertise. So which is, let's say, equivalent of the researchers of AI. Yeah? They have to be the great business people, business savvy. So far so good. But there is a third angle. And the third angle, they have to be great engineers. And science and engineering, these are not the same. Science is everything you do in the lab. Engineering is where everything meets reality. That's the difference between theoretical and practical. And everybody can do something at grams scale, but doing something in the thousands of tons scale, that is completely different. Yeah, I'll give you an example. When we engaged with H2 Pro in Israel, they were doing, and that's public, they were doing like 1 kilogram, 2 kilograms of green hydrogen per day. At the same time, the Israeli refineries, so I'm taking an equivalent, was doing several tons of hydrogen every hour. So this is not 1 or 2 orders of magnitude more. This is 5, 6 orders of magnitude more. This is gigantically different. And to get there, you have to know how you scale. You have to know how you build plants. You have to know how you do blended financing for plants. So we're asking our entrepreneurs to do be the great scientists. So to come up with innovation that can abate CO2, they need to be really great at business, and they need to know how to build it. And that is difficult. And therefore, what we're trying to do is not to look for the perfect species, yeah, but rather to find ways how we can augment, how we can help and make them super founders and supercharge them, so to speak.
So looking for a unicorn. Yeah.
Exactly. We're not looking for the unicorn founder, so to speak, yeah, but we want to make and you know what? I strongly believe that VC is not just about finding unicorns, is about making unicorns. Yeah, it's not just about the selection, but rather where you invested, making them successful. And I think that if you look at the way Andreessen, for example, is working with all the people that they have on board, it's a machine that is supporting the startups, right? And helping them, they're increasing their chances for success. And this is what we're trying to do as well.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting and very useful for founders. I mean, there's more than the capital. There's this all support and needs to be put in place along the journey. Just a question, maybe related to. I mean, we cover a lot about green ammonia. It's definitely like a topic that you guys are looking carefully right now, but. Besides that, I mean, which sectors are the most promising for you today in terms of what I call the impact cash return or ICR, meaning building companies while creating highly profitable business and with a large impact. So, any underdogs area or subcategories within the ecosystem that you're also looking at and very excited about?
For sure. I mean, one clear candidate is everything around CDR, so carbon dioxide removal. We're looking into different pathways, ocean CDR, direct air capture. I think over there, we have already kind of a proof point that if you build something successful, then you will see unicorns, yeah. If you look at Climeworks, for example, that is still a private company, but have a look at carbon engineering that was bought by Oxy a couple of months ago for $1 billion. So this is showing that there is appetite and need. And generally, we believe that carbon removal is going to be a $1 trillion industry. Yeah. And as said, talk also because you need to sequester that, but also that sea, again, if you don't take the sea from dinosaur bones, then you can use the sea and utilize that in as a green sea in many applications. So that's definitely a topic that is very hot, I would say.
Anything else that you guys are looking at right now that is exciting?
Another one that is we're going to publish very soon a deep dive on is raw materials, minerals. I mean, minerals, if you want, you can say these are the new oil, because an electric vehicle in comparison combustion engine car needs something like 6 to 8 times more minerals. And those minerals are being produced in a certain place and excavated and refined. In these places, I would say 80 to 90% of the time, depending on the mineral, is China. So basically that means, and not always in a very good working conditions. So you have to make sure that you're not solving one problem. You don't have this carbon tunnel view, not solving one problem, but creating another problem. And therefore, the way we use minerals is something that is bound to explode, so to speak, in a good way. And you can already see that, for example, in battery recycling. Why is that? Because not just because it's a good thing to do, but because of the minerals in the battery, they're already there. So if they're already there, it would be a shame to waste them rather than to recycle them. And that is also an area where you already see several unicorns out there.
So looking at the opposite of the spectrum, what is less, I would say, exciting or interesting right now? Where you think that a lot have been maybe hyped were there before, or maybe things have been already allocated. Any like sectors that you guys are a little bit less interested right now?
I don't think that there is a single sector that I would say this is too high. I would say that we're not totally looking into solar for example, because I think that over there, majority of the things have been already invented. And other innovation that we see usually is incremental, and rather than disruptive. And that is why solar is less of an area for that we focus on. And maybe because all of us have, or especially me, have bruises and scars from cleantech 1.0 in solar. So that could be also a reason.
Okay. Speaking about impact, yeah, that's something that is definitely something key with Extantia. So, I mean, in comparison to other funds, you mentioned yourself like climate first and then VC firm in itself. So, can you tell us a bit more about like this? How do you guys calculate impact in itself in terms of CO2 abate or avoided? In terms of maybe social impact, if there's, do you guys use any like frameworks? Or I mean, you mentioned that you have the head of science in your team as well. So do you have an extended team of scientists to assess each project and individual? So how does it work?
Sure. So we're a VC firm with a person that his title is head of carbon math. So and Francesco he's a professor of life cycle assessments. So that is what is in his background, also civil engineer, and so he knows the topic upside down, and basically he does nothing but to look into the emission reduction potential of every technology that we're evaluating. Now, this is naturally done in a process, so this is not immediately everything that comes through the door. We do a full-blown analysis, but as we progress, we start with a back of the envelope calculation, and as we progress, we try to be more rigorous and more accurate, granular about the calculation. Now, you have to understand that this topic of life cycle analysis, that's the branch that is looking into replacement. Basically everything that we are doing is about replacing. You take a high carbon emitting process and you want to replace it with something that is low emitting. So basically it's all about the carbon map that we're looking at. The impact that we're talking about is all about, I took something that is X, now it's Y, so my impact is X minus Y. That is basically what we're trying to do. The challenge is that life cycle assessment was invented as a backward looking methodology. Basically, you're now using plastic. You want to do, instead of do this pen from plastic, you want to do this pen from wood. You know the characteristics of wood, you know the characteristic of plastic, you know the supply chain of these two, and you replace. That is how these things came to life. The challenge that we have, we're not looking backwards, we're looking forward. And forward-looking analysis means that there are a lot of assumptions. And as a scientist, you know that if you're adding more assumptions and more hypotheses to the algorithm, it doesn't mean that you're more accurate. It means more complexity, but the accuracy may not be necessarily better. And the thing is that, what is the energy mix in 30 years? We don't know. We need to take an assumption. What is going to be the feedstock of a certain process in a certain amount of years? We don't know. So basically, you have to do all these assumptions. So I like to say that every calculation that we're doing has a very interesting characteristic, and that is that it is wrong. But what we try to do is understand and come into something that we can, in good conscience, say this is in the ballpark of what is the impact and why. And that is why we're very brutal, transparent, and publish everything, that all calculations that we're doing. Yeah, you can find them and publish them, about why we think that this is X, this is Y, and this is why we think that X minus Y is a lot. And this is basically the main, I would say, thinking behind every analysis that we're doing. Is it a direct influencer, or is it an enabler? If it's an enabler, why do we believe that this is a real enabler, and not something that is sort of, yeah, and things like that. And this is the most of where we spend most of the discussion in the team about how we think about it, and then we go out and do the calculations.
So what's next for Extantia?
I mean, I can talk short term. Of course, we're currently raising the next fund, and we're already deploying, and we'll close it sometime next year and do many good investments. And I hope we progress and move move the needle on climate. Generally, I think that if we look even mid-long term, the knowledge that we gather here around climate and the transition, we may want to extend that as a platform and be a one-stop shop for founders along their journey. Yeah, it could be even as they start with liquid capital, and it could be even later on with debt financing for their first of a kind facility or infrastructure scale. Yeah? Because at the end of the day, I mean, the actual underwriting is different, but the knowledge of understanding batteries, materials, and things like that is pretty much the same. So it's all about, as we say in Extantia, is about acceleration of the transition.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think, the after VC investments like this, value of the debt prior the bank and the financial institution taking over, there's a huge gap there that alternative fundings should definitely be plugged into. But that's interesting. So thanks for sharing all of that. A little more personal question. What would you say to the person who are afraid or feel demoralized by all the already visible consequences of climate change? As I always ask to each of my guests, are we doomed?
No, I don't think so. I think, catastrophe-looking perspective is never a good plan. I think that we're very optimistic, and if we look on history, and even take within climate, yeah, and the solutions that we currently have a look at the PV solar panels. Yeah, they were having a green premium that was huge, and over the past decade, price went down 90%. So I believe we will see the same with other technologies, and I believe that mankind will find a way in the solutions for this challenge.
How can the community of investors, founders, and experts listening to the show can help you today?
I think what's important, and we started talking about that in the beginning, this is a challenge that, and this is just beyond the pure financial return, and this is a challenge that none of us can address alone. No 100 million or 1 billion fund can solve alone. And this is nothing that is happening in Germany or Netherlands or the United States alone. Yeah? This is a cross-border topic, and it will only be solved cross-border. And that's why it's important that all of us collaborate, and way more than what we're used to in the mainstream industry. And by the way, I don't think that collaboration will diminish financial return, but actually make it even better and stronger.
Any question I should have asked you I didn't do for this first part of the interview?
This is the first part?
No, we only have like a 5 more minutes section. It's 3 questions. So I guess I covered mainly all the topics with you. Just thank you so much, Yair, for your time, for your incredible insight on the ammonia and green ammonia topic in itself. Thank you so much for all the time and effort that you put to push and support founders to build a better world and fight the climate change. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
And thank you for your work and promoting all these good things. So thank you very much.
Thanks again for joining us on the Tech for Climate podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. Stay tuned next week for more climate tech insights. In the meantime, head on over to our webpage at startupbasecamp.org, where we have lots more insights and resources for anyone wanting to get involved in climate tech. If you find our resources useful, please consider donating to support our small self-funded team. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. And see you next time.